Okay.
Perfect. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us this morning. If Chuck, you want to go to the next slide, quickly go through the agenda. I'm John Carbone, Vice President of Sales and Marketing. I'll be the moderator today for this call. I'll do some quick introductions. Then we have Anne Kothawala. He'll take us through some legislative changes and reopening plans. Marc Rex, our Director of Fresh and Foodservice, will walk us through some best practices, provide some resources, and talk about some specific personal protective equipment that's available. I would like to take a moment and introduce our panel for today's call. As I mentioned, I'm John Carbone. I'm Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Canada. I'll be your moderator for today's call. Chuck Arcand, our Director of Marketing, and Marc Rex, Director of Foodservice Fresh. We also have a special guest on our panel, Anne Kothawala, the President and CEO of the Convenience Council of Canada. The Convenience Council of Canada, also known as the CICC, is a national non-for-profit council that represents the convenience store industry and advocates on our behalf. They are our national voice that represent the retailers, vendor partners, and distributors. The 4 pillars of the CICC are advocacy, research and education, responsible retailing, and events and awards, with a focus on serving our customers, our industry, an industry that employs 250,000 Canadians and sells $56 billion annually in goods and services. Before we start, I want to give all of you a big thank you. You all deserve tremendous praise for continuing to operate your retail locations as an essential service during these challenging times, and helping supply the local communities that you serve purchase their necessities in this time of crisis. I know it's been difficult. We appreciate your commitment and hard work. Thank you. I'll be back at the end of the session to take questions that have been submitted. I will now pass it to Anne to take us through the legislative changes and reopening plans. Thank you.
Thanks very much, John, and welcome to everyone. And again, just want to reinforce John's comments. You really are on the front lines running your stores, and you're to be commended. So we just wanted to give you a bit of an update in terms of some of the legislative changes that have been happening somewhat behind the scenes that you might not be aware of. So the first is to really understand that we had to work with every province to ensure that convenience stores were on the list of essential services. So it really is important that we are able to stay open and serve our customers. But with that does come a big responsibility. Just as you've seen with grocery stores, pharmacies, obviously they have bigger crowds that they have to manage, but nonetheless, we have to ensure that as convenience stores and as an industry, we're responding well and really following the guidelines. So ensure that your customers are physically distanced, ensure that you've got increased sanitization procedures, that you're wiping down frequently on high touch points. All of those things are really important because it really goes to the reputation as well of our industry. So we want customers to feel confident and comfortable. In terms of some of the other legislative changes that we look at the federal level, the federal government came out several weeks ago and basically said that in light of the pandemic, that they were going to halt all non-essential regulations. So anything that was sort of coming down the pipe has been halted that is not sort of critical. And the areas that really impacts our industry are primarily related to vaping, because there were some changes expected in terms of vaping packaging. So we understand that those won't be happening at the moment, and that will happen at a later date. So also with respect to some of the provinces, if you look at Ontario, also with respect to vaping, there were changes that were supposed to have come into force on May 1st that would have limited our ability to sell certain flavors, as well as limited our ability to sell higher nicotine content. So only allowing convenience stores to sell really quite a limited amount of vaping products. And that was initially supposed to come into force on May 1st. It's now been pushed to July 1st, and we continue to work with government to make the case that if, God forbid, we are in a second wave of the pandemic, and once again has, certain businesses start to open up, perhaps including vape shops, if they are forced to close again, then a lot of our adult smoking customers who have made the transition will now not have the choice of flavors and nicotine strength in our channel. So that's something really important that we're working on with the Ontario government. I'm sure as many of you have seen, just the last point on this is that if you look at particularly stores that are located close to reserves, we've seen a real increase in terms of our tobacco sales as a channel, which is directly correlated with the fact that a lot of reserves are no longer producing. So they're basically closed. So as a consequence, we've seen that contraband is way down. So that's just something to keep in mind, and something that we're reminding government that this would be, after we're through this pandemic, it would be the right time to really focus on the contraband issue once and for all. And it's not just in Ontario, it's in different parts across the country. So Chuck, I'll move to the next slide. So in terms of reopening plans, I mean, this is something that we are all sort of seeing in the news. And the reality is that it falls within the responsibility of the province. So the province gets to mandate who, which businesses get to come back on stream. And so every single province out there has a bit of a different timeline, and that's really based primarily on the number of cases. So, certain provinces that have done quite well, like PEI as an example, even though it's small, they were one of the first provinces to sort of come back on stream and say, here's the phased approach in terms of reopening our economy. So Saskatchewan, Quebec, Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and PEI so far have already kind of hit what I'd call phase one. And most of the provinces have 3 phases. The first phase is, allowing certain businesses to reopen, and they gradually, and at the end of each phase, they need to make sure that there hasn't been a spike in infections, because otherwise they have to go back to the start, if you will, and reset. So that's really critical, because obviously the healthcare system can't handle a huge spike in cases. But they want to balance that with getting the economy kickstarted and getting people back to work. In Ontario, they've taken a cautious approach. Premier announced last week that garden centers, marinas, and golf courses, now again, to sort of get ready, certain parts of construction that were closed down have now reopened, which is obviously good for our channel. And good for our business, because we have a lot of construction workers that will come into our stores. So that's certainly helpful for us. Now, Ontario has also provided guidelines on reopening to businesses. And the reason that that's critical for us as an industry, and for you as convenience store owners, is that I think what's going to happen is they're going to get a lot more rigorous as more businesses start to open up. You're going to see that inspectors will be out in force. They're going to be making sure that you're complying with the strict guidelines that are in place. So again, you have to ensure, it's really critical that when your customers are coming into the store, that you don't have a congregation of 10 customers at a time, that you're really paying attention to those things, because that is going to be really critically important. And particularly as more and more businesses open up, and as more and more people go back to work, now all of a sudden, we weren't seeing a lot of crowds over the last 6 weeks in our stores, but that could start to happen, and we need to make sure that we manage it responsibly as an industry. And I think customers will also demand it, right? This is a new world now, and customers are going to have expectations around safety. And they're not going to feel safe going into your store if they feel like you don't have the right protocols in place to protect them. So that is going to be the new normal. That is the way customers are, or not customers, but just generally Canadians are now behaving. They are turning to their spots that they shop at to really show leadership and show that they're looking after the customer. Another thing that I think is important to remember, and I'll just close with this thought. And we've had a number of our members come to us and say, well, what do we do when a customer refuses to take off their mask and we need to check for ID? You know, again, as an industry, we're responsible retailers, and it's our legal obligation to make sure that we're not selling the products that are age restricted. Make sure that we're not selling them to underage customers. So you are actually obliged to ensure, if you have any doubt that the customer is not of age, I mean, obviously, if it's a senior citizen or something, you don't have to ask them to remove their mask. But if you have any doubt, then you are obliged to ask them to temporarily remove their mask in order to really check against their piece of ID, because you really can't effectively check somebody's identity if half of their face is covered. So you're just asking them to temporarily do it. You should be physically distanced enough so you're not putting them at risk, and you're just asking for a temporarily remove the mask so that I can check your ID. And CICC is produced, I know Marc is going to speak to this later, but I'll just close with, we do have a number of resources, and we did produce a poster, and I think poor Marc has already provided that to you. So I encourage you to use it and put it up in your store. Thank you.
Go ahead, Marc.
Hi, Anne. Sorry, I was trying to get unmuted there. Sorry, everybody. Thank you very much for joining our call today. Thank you, Anne, for joining us. We really enjoy and we're proud to be part of the CICC. A couple of things I want to talk about today with you guys on the phone, on our webinar today, is convenience stores are an important part of our communities as we deal with the impact of COVID-19. Keeping our customers, our employees safe is our top priority, along with ensuring that our customers have the access to the product that they need. So CICC, they pulled together some best practices, some guidelines for you to follow. And the first thing we want to talk about is signage. Anne mentioned a great poster that was pulled together for you to post in your store to talk about the IDs, the masks, removing those when you come in, and to be kind. So Cormac has been passing that out. If you haven't got it, please go to the CICC website, where you can go and download that and print it. Put up a sign instructing customers not to come in the store if they're unwell or if they traveled outside of Canada in the last 14 days is important. Ensure we encourage social distancing for our customers when they come in the store. You see in stores now, you have markers on the floor, 2 meters apart for the queue at the cash. There's directional signs on the floor to direct your customers throughout the store without congesting in one area. Enhanced cleaning. We all know cleaning is a huge part of what we're going through right now. Make sure that we increase the cleaning of the high touch surfaces by employees and customers, including the front area and cash, the pin pad at the cash, the cooler door handles, and the store interior and exterior door handles. Increase the frequency of the cleaning as much as possible, at least twice per shift, but please do it as much as you can with an approved disinfectant. If you're unsure if your disinfectant is approved, you can go on the Health Canada website where you can do a DIN number search, and it'll give you a list of approved chemicals and cleaning supplies to kill the COVID-19 virus. In the event you don't have it, we recommend 1 teaspoon of bleach combined with 3 cups of water will make an effective cleaning solution. Customer-facing supplies. It's important to have a hand sanitizer, an alcohol-based or alcohol-based wipes at the front cash or at the front entry door of all your stores, so that a customer has the option to sanitize their hands before coming in the store and when leaving the store. So please ensure you have sanitizer available. Staff customer interactions. Make sure your employees are washing hands thoroughly with soap and water, and use hand sanitizer frequently throughout the day and in between hand washings. Many staff are wearing gloves to prevent the spread of germs with customers. We do have gloves available for you guys and your stores for your customers. Customers are being asked when possible to pay with debit and credit, and also encourage your customers to handle their own card and use the tap on the debit machine. Close one for me, doing the Fresh and Foodservice with Cormac, is the sites with self-serve coffee and food. As we know, our food service operations have got hit hard during the COVID. We had to shut down a lot. It's important that coffee, slush, if you're going to keep those machines open, that we make sure we make adjustments to increase sanitation of the self-serve handles like the creamers or the coffee dispensers or the slush handles. I see some stores today, they're taking the slush cups and the coffee cups, they're putting behind the cash and then passing them to the customer as they buy the coffee. So there's only one touch on the cup going right to the customer, and they can get their hot beverage or their slush product. Self-serve foods are being converted to a full-serve model only, pre-packaged and temporarily suspended until the COVID clears up. So again, if you have pizza, roller grill, consider options where it's in the cooler, where we have pre-packaged sandwiches, or we have packaging that protects the product from any spread of the virus. The other thing to mention was the seating in Nova Scotia, British Columbia, PEI, and Ontario are not permitted to have any seating available for customers and are strictly takeout only. And most importantly, sites with gas, increasing frequency of cleaning the pin pad and the fuel dispensers, hand warmers, all the nozzles, the fuel pumps, making sure you have hand sanitizer or wipes available at the pumps is really important. And consider requiring, at least encouraging your customers to pay at the pump. My next slide, I'd like to talk about some resources. So the Canadian Industry Council of Canada, they have a website. They have lots of resources on there. You go to the COVID-19 resources, they have lots of best practices that I just talked about. They have the do's and don'ts, be kind poster that you have seen on your screen here that we recommend you print off and put it up in your store for your customers. So please feel free to go on there, check out the resources. If you're unsure of any questions, there's lots on there, and I'm sure that they have all the answers. The other thing is too, they have a tracking document on their website, which I think is fantastic. If you're receiving an inconsistent message from a health department or inspector, feel free, fill out the tracking document, send it to CICC so they can track it for you and follow up accordingly. The next one is Health Canada. They have great posters. We have them posted all up over our workplace, all about the disease, how to stop the spread, cleaning and disinfecting public spaces, reducing the spread, cleaning your hands, just things to make sure that we follow the basic guidelines to help reduce the spread of the virus. Another great resource that we found was the Retail Council of Canada. Go on there. They have tons and tons of resources. Some ones that we've seen coming around a lot was how to put on, use, take off a disposable mask. A lot of people are going to be wearing masks right now. It's important that they use them properly to help reduce the spread of the virus. There's another reference there of how to create or make your own cloth mask at home. So I thought that was very interesting. The last thing I want to talk about is the personal protective equipment. We spent a lot of the last 6 to 8 weeks sourcing, finding protective equipment for stores and our customers. It was a tough battle. The first 4 weeks, everybody was eating up everything in the market. We couldn't find a disinfectant. Hand sanitizers were going low everywhere. Disposable gloves are still hard to come by. But now we're starting to get to a better position where we have product available in our warehouses for you and your customers. Protective face masks, they're disposable. There are 3-ply face masks. We have those available for you now, and you can get them more regularly in the stores that you shop frequently. Disposable gloves, protective face shields. I'm sure all of you have those up now, but if you don't, they are available. You put them up around the cash area to reduce the spread. Purell's on there. We don't have Purell right now. All their product is going to frontline resources, but we do have other products available today. And please, if you're unsure, if you don't have any, please reach out to your Core-Mark sales rep, or please call your order desk, and they will supply you with some order numbers for sanitizers. And the other big important part is the disinfectant. There's only so many approved disinfectants to kill this virus. So please ensure that whatever you use, and just do your due diligence, check the government website to make sure that you're using the correct product to kill the virus. We do have some products available at Core-Mark now. Please note though, when you do bring in the sanitizers, disinfectants, if you have a spray bottle that you've been using, Please don't discard it. They're hard to come by right now. All the manufacturers are having a hard time finding them. So please reuse them when you can, and stay safe, everybody. Again, if you have any questions on any PPE, personal protective equipment, please reach out to your Core-Mark sales rep or territory manager. I want to ask, mention one thing as well. On the bottom of your screen, you have a question and answer tab. You can press the question and answer and ask a question for any of the panelists on the call, and we'll do our best to answer them for you. Again, at the end of the call, there will be a survey as well for you to take, a poll. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Anne, and thank you, Mark. Really appreciate it. I think these are, unprecedented times, very challenging times. A lot of information coming at us from multiple sources. We're trying to navigate uncharted territories. Hopefully, we shed a little bit of light on some of the legislative changes and also some of the legislative opportunities for small businesses that are available to help us during these challenging times. Also, from a personal protective equipment perspective, obviously the number one priority is to keep our employees and our communities safe, but also to give the consumer a sense of comfort that they're entering a location that's responsible, to entering a location that is adhering to all the government regulations, from masks to shields to cleaning practices. So the more posters you can put up, the more visible, hand sanitizers, that's going to give the consumer a sense of comfort that we're responsible retailers, right? And they can come shop at our stores. From a question perspective, I've received a couple of questions privately. One of the questions is, if retailers do not adhere to these regulations, what happens? Maybe I'll pass that over to Anne. So Anne, if some of the recommendations or even the legislative requirements that the government is putting out, if retailers don't adhere to them, what happens, or what can potentially happen?
Well, I think the biggest thing is, the prospect of fines. I think that will be the first. I mean, we've already heard stories about, consumers or just, citizens not abiding by certain rules and being fined by bylaw officers. So I think, given the importance of health and safety in the current environment, it will be inspectors that will be coming by and doing spot checks. And if they feel that you're not complying with the basic guidelines. And again, there is a bit of a gray area, because at the moment, it's not mandated that your customers or your staff have to wear a mask, as an example. So that's really, a lot of companies right now, a lot of the larger chains in the convenience channel are kind of struggling with this, because they're basically leaving it up to their individual employees. They're making masks available, but they're not mandating that they have to wear them. But at the moment, there isn't a mandate to wear a mask, but that could change. Right now, it's just a recommendation.
Okay. We also had another question, and we'll be sharing to all the participants all the links, all the kind of go-to websites, everything basically in the presentation will be emailed to all the participants. So you'll have all the different links that you can go to gather some of these resources. Also, you can contact any one of us directly or your local Core-Mark representative, and they'll have all this information as well. We really like your feedback at the end of this. We'd like to have another session as we evolve from really lockdown, shelter in place, and we start opening up. Things are changing. Consumer behavior is changing. We're doing a lot of studies and a lot of research with a number of different companies to really understand what the world is going to look like, or at least somewhat predict what the world is going to look like coming out of this thing. So I think probably a follow-up webinar will be aimed at what categories are going to emerge, what categories are going to decline, what is the new consumer going to look like, and how does that really pertain to the convenience store industry. So if you have any suggestions, any feedback that you can provide us, we'd like to tailor these to really make them as informative as possible for our independents, for our independent customers. There's another question we have here. Early indication, what categories have you seen increase and decline during these challenging times in the convenience stores? Maybe I'll pass that over to Chuck. Chuck is our director of marketing. He runs a lot of our analytics, a lot of our data. We've got we've been running a lot of reports to really keep an eye on what categories are emerging and which ones are declining. Chuck, maybe I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, John. Yeah, so what we're seeing in the market is the first few weeks we saw some bulking up of most commodities in early April. As we moved through April, we saw a decline in candy to a point where candy was down. Candy, when I talk candy, I mean chocolate bars and other confectionery items. They were down 10, 15, almost 20%. They've rebounded in the last week a fair bit. Some of the commodities that are doing really well are obviously all the PPE. We're seeing PPE. We recommend that stores have an end cap as soon as you enter the store to come in, and so the consumer can buy a 50-pack of masks and whatnot. So it's been pretty good. The other commodities we're seeing are the bare essentials: your milk, your bacon, your eggs, those sorts of things. We're not seeing much of a decline on the cigarette counts and other tobacco products. It's mostly the declines are in candy. Gum was hit especially hard because people don't want to interact right now, so they're not as conscious of their breath, is what Wrigley tells me, and they're saying that that's why gum is off about 40% right now. As we open up, we're probably going to start to see that rebound. So I hope that answers the questions, John.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. What we also found from a consumer behavior perspective, it's becoming, it's challenging to get to a supermarket, right? You got to wait in line. You've got to wear personal protective equipment. There's, lines on the ground that you have to follow. So when people need the essentials, the dairy, the milk, the bread, the bacon, the cheeses, they're going to the local community convenience stores. They're opting to purchase a lot of these products outside of that grocery channel. So I think that's an opportunity to capitalize on. And the other one is with the legislative changes on vaping. Some of the flavors, primarily with Juul, being eliminated by July. I think there's an opportunity. Make sure you're always in stock on the flavor product, as long as they're available. I know that they're running out depending on the different areas of Canada, but I think that's also an opportunity. Indulgence and feel-good type products seem to be holding their own, so I think there's opportunities there as well. I don't see any other questions.
I see a question, John.
Oh, okay.
I see a question. Angela's asked if we could share the legislation information. Just review that slide again. Anne, do you want to just review that one slide?
Sure. I guess if there's a specific question around, something that wasn't clear, like whether it's the federal government piece in terms of halting the non-essential regulations. There's a lot of stuff happening on the regulatory front, so I just tried to give a quick snapshot, but happy to, follow up with greater detail, depending on what the specific question is.
Okay.
So if you have any specific questions, you can email them after the call, and we'll be more than happy to either call you or send you information or reply with an answer. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think the attendee was happy with the slide. We just put it back up. That worked. Perfect.
Well, we're at the 10:30 mark. Again, I want to thank the panelists. I want to thank the participants. Thank you for your questions. They were great. And also, again, I just want to reiterate, thank you for being an essential service. I know it hasn't been easy to keep our employees and our communities safe and operate during these challenging times. So a big thank you. And we'll send out another invite with a follow-up. Thank you very much. I appreciate your feedback. Put down whatever you'd like to see or some suggestions. We'd really appreciate that. But thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.